have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Gay USA, I'm Andy Hum.
And I'm Erin Johns.
Welcome, Erin Johns.
Hi, Andy.
Nice to see you
again. It's great to be back again.
In the news, wow, what a news week. Out gay Pete Buttigieg has scored big in the Iowa Democratic presidential caucuses.
And Bayard Rustin has been pardoned for having gay sex back in 1953 by Governor Newsom.
And he's inviting others to come forward for pardons. At his State of the Union speech, Trump honored anti-LGBT bigot Rush Limbaugh. He lied repeatedly, he snubbed Speaker Pelosi, and was rebuked right back by her.
And we have 200 anti-LGBT bills being introduced this year in state legislature.
Exhausting. The first out LGBT federal judge, Deborah Batts, who was confirmed back in 1994, has died at the age of 72.
It's too young. And a park in Brooklyn is going to be named after Stonewall activist Marsha P. Johnson.
India is cracking down on LGBT pride.
And we're going to give you the best LGBT roundup from the Super Bowl.
Our guest at the end of our hour, for our last 15 minutes, is Judith Kaysen Windsor. She's the surviving spouse of Edie Windsor, to talk about Edie's memoir that's just been published, A Wild and Precious Life.
Do you know where that line comes from?
No.
It's a Mary Oliver poem.
Well,
it's the last line in a Mary Oliver poem, who was a lesbian
poet. Thank you very
poet.
much.
You're welcome.
I know? It's very good to have you here. And history has been made in Iowa. I know Iowa was a mess and all this stuff, but the results seem to say that in terms of delegate count, Pete Buttigieg, an out gay man, has come out on top, and if maybe there'll be some more figures that come in that will put him a close second to Bernie Sanders. Sanders seems to have won on the popular vote.
Right.
So that is historic. I'm going to read a quote. When Pete got the news, he said, "This validates for a kid somewhere in a community, wondering if he or she belongs, or they belong in their own family, that if you believe in yourself and your country, there is a lot backing up that belief." That's so, and he started to tear up when he's pretty controlled. He's very
cool.
Yeah,
cool customer.
He's a very cool customer. We have a picture there of Pete and his husband Chasten, and he introduced in Iowa Chasten as the next first gentleman of the United States.
I hope so. I'd like that.
Now, there was one woman in the caucuses. Did you see this on video?
Who didn't know he was gay?
Yes.
That woman.
She found out at the caucuses she'd already voted for him, and she says to the guy, I got to change my vote.
I got to take it back, yes.
It was pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Disturbing.
She looked a little clueless
now,
to me.
Look, I haven't endorsed a candidate. I don't know about you.
You're not going to come out team
No.
Bernie,
I don't.
team Pete?
I'm a reporter. We have to report on these things. But for a lot of you, there was the preliminary results there with Pete on top in the delegate count.
Right.
Of course, the big news also is that Biden was in fourth place. But when the Associated Press asked people at the caucuses in a poll if you're LGBT and who did you vote for, 44% said Sanders, 20% Warren, and 16% Buttigieg. And my interpretation of that is that if you're going to tell a pollster in Iowa that you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender, that you're going to be more liberal. And he is not seen as the most liberal candidate. Right. So I think that's kind of what happened there.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the report from there. And then we have, I'm trying to give them some good news about Bayard Rustin.
Oh, yeah, and happy Black History Month.
Yes.
I'd like to celebrate with this little bit of good news. After how many years?
Well, Bayard was a peace activist. He died at the age of 75 back in 1987, but he was arrested in 1953 in a car in Pasadena, I think it was, and thrown in prison for a while over that. So Governor Gavin Newsom
has pardoned him posthumously, and it's better than not, but it's, you know.
It's better than not, and you know, I kept saying, well, what? And we said it when we first. By the way, we have a quote from Bayard up there on the screen. We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers, which he was. He was getting arrested on purpose all the time for peace activism, for civil rights, all that. But so he gets a pardon. Great. And his record can be wiped clean.
Can other people? This can now be applied to other people, other cases.
I was pushing for that, and I don't know if the governor heard me, but he said, I invite anybody who went through a similar experience to come forward and get pardoned. I think we should get some reparations going here for the people. They've done that in other countries for these people convicted under these laws.
In Britain, especially.
Yes,
they have done it.
And I think, did they try to do anything in Australia? Maybe. Well,
no.
Anyway, that's what should happen. People who were convicted under these awful laws. I mean, the charge against Bayard was vagrancy, but it was all about sex. So, progress. Okay, now
we should now have the bad news.
Did you watch the State of the Union? You did.
Yes.
I have friends who couldn't watch it.
You have to force yourself.
I did.
It was incredible.
We're journalists.
That's our job, right?
Yes.
But it was disturbing. It was depressing. I had a couple of vodkas. I will not lie.
Did you have a sip for every lie?
I had a drink before I watched.
You would be under the table.
I had two, and then I watched it. So I was comfortably numb, as they say. And I needed to get through it, because it was like the Nuremberg Rally. It really was. It felt so uncomfortable. All the cheering, all the grandstanding was really offensive.
I mean, giving the Medal of Freedom to Rush Limbaugh, a sexist bigot, a homophobic bigot, a
racist. And he made that crack about lesbian farmers. Who doesn't like lesbian farmers?
How would we eat without lesbian farmers?
What would Oregon do, for example?
And, Trump says, I'm going to end AIDS by 2030. 2030. And he proclaims this, big hand. He's cutting Medicaid and Medicare. He's cutting your access to drugs. I mean, he says he's for drugs, being cheaper. He's not making that happen. He's making the opposite happen. So then, and I have to say, did we put up the picture of Nancy? It was thrilling to watch Nancy rip up that speech at the end. Of course, Pence said, she might as well, I thought she was ripping up the Constitution. Oh, we might have to bring the 25th Amendment against you, Mike, if you don't understand the difference between the Nuremberg Rally speech.
That felt good.
It was kind of unbelievable, and some people are saying it was just a gesture, but it was perfect.
It was an emphatic gesture, and what's so interesting is the juxtaposition of Pence, his face, he's completely oblivious. He's just enthralled to his master, and Nancy is very clearly stating what she thinks.
It was great.
But it was really all propaganda. It wasn't even a proper address. It was just grandstanding. Most of it was economic based as well. There was really nothing in there
Much of it lies, but
or inflated.
Then it's depressing to read that his Gallup rating is up to 49%, and his opposition number is 50. Undecided about Trump, 1%. Right. But it was nice to see, in terms of the impeachment, Doug Jones from Alabama, profile encouraged, saying, I'm going to vote to convict. Because, he's likely to lose that seat unless they put, what's his name, Roy Moore up there against him again, the child molester. And then Mitt Romney said he's going to vote to convict, which makes it bipartisan.
He's a wild card, Mitt.
So we're stuck with them. I do think, of course, Susan Collins, who's a coward, says, I think Trump has learned his lesson.
No.
And he immediately said, I didn't do anything wrong.
You never let a narcissist have a second chance.
Right.
Ever.
Well, we've given him the presidency.
Right.
All right. What else about Trump? It certainly is depressing about the Senate, a totally corrupt institution at this point. I talked about the fact that, he announced his plan to overhaul Medicaid. It's called the Healthy Adult Opportunity Act.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
But it discriminates against disabled people, for sure. A lot of people are going to be affected.
AIDS,
yep.
Everybody. All right. Well, we have some good news. Well, not good news. Well, somebody stood up to them in the Department of Education, a whistleblower, against Betsy DeVos.
Right.
This guy's name, we have him here. His name is Dwayne Bensing.
Oh, yeah.
He's a whistleblower. He's a lawyer in the Office of Civil Rights, which is now being run by an anti-LGBT bigot. And he was he filed a whistleblower complaint because he was fired because he exposed the fact that they were doing these things about getting rid of trans rights and all that stuff without going through proper procedures.
Discriminating against trans athlete students as well.
Yes, the big thing was they intervened in a case about that, what you just said about athletes, where they had no business even being involved in it. And he said, well, what are we doing? We don't do this. And we usually take several months to filter through the case, but it's all propaganda now. So he's now an employee of the ACLU in Delaware. He had been part of an LGBT affinity group at the Department of Education.
But there is actually an act that protects whistleblowers. So I'm wondering if he's going to be protected by that.
That's why he's suing.
If you have legitimate cause to believe that rules have been violated, you're protected. So hopefully
you are supposed to be. So he has a lawsuit.
Right.
And we hope Dwayne wins. And then we're going to have Edie Windsor's surviving spouse on, Judith Kaysen Windsor, on later. But Edie's lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, did you read this?
Bobby Kaplan. Now tell me.
Well, she is seeking Trump's DNA to see if it matches that of the dress of Jean Carroll, who says Trump raped me.
Oh, wow. The author.
In the 1990s.
So she's a columnist. I've read her advice columns.
Jean Carroll.
Yeah, I mean.
She's very credible.
I think so.
Trump grabbed her in a dressing room of a fancy...
In Bloomingdale's or Saks. It was one of them.
One of them.
One of them.
One of the fancy stores.
But you know, if anyone can do this, it's Bobby Kaplan. So...
Yeah, she's tough.
Go, Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby Kaplan took the Edie Windsor case when the other groups didn't want it. No, the other groups didn't even want to do it. They didn't think Edie was going to be a good plaintiff. She won your federal rights for your marriages.
Yes, she's a personal hero of mine.
Okay. I've got to say, I was on a phone call this week. You know, they're talking about all the Supreme Court decisions that are coming down, and they're trying to get us ready for them. The three big cases, 2 sexual orientation, 1 transgender, right? We're not confident about these things. Their hope is that Gorsuch is going to vote with us because of the letter of the law, and that he sometimes goes that way, but I'm not.
There's like about 34 anti-trans bills right now. ACLU has them listed. And this to me is so overkill because we have, what is the population of the transgender community? It's like 0.6%, according to the Williams Institute.
Oh, it's always best to pick on a small minority. It's harder for them to fight back.
34 bills.
It's horrible.
It is horrible.
It's hateful. Well, so should we talk about some of these things that are happening around the states? Where do I have any of that information?
South Dakota was interesting. What's happening there? Well, there was a bunch of anti-trans stuff happening now, but Iowa and South Dakota really the two.
It was nice to see in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that hundreds demonstrated against a slew of anti-LGBT bills. We never know if these bills are going to go all the way, but we try to keep you aware of them. You've got to cue into your state and figure out what's going on there. We'll tell you about as much as we can. In Florida, a bill to nullify local laws protecting LGBT rights. Now, 60% of the state is already covered by protections. Miami and Fort Lauderdale, all these cities, right?
The gay ones.
But
then what about Tampa?
60% of the state. I don't have the whole list in front of me, but the House committee there in Florida passed this bill 10-5, which would nullify all of them, and saying you can't have this because the state doesn't have it.
Yeah, that's a worry.
So now they've introduced it for the last 10 years, so we don't know if it's going to go forward.
Is it my imagination, or is California swinging to the right? Because in LA they're having the worst number of hate crimes they've had in a decade.
I don't think politically it's swinging to the right, but the whole country has become a hot mess of bigotry and people feeling that they can strike out. And if you want to see hatred, go to Texas. The state Republican Party rejected the Log Cabin Club for a booth at their annual convention for the party for the 20th time, calling its members immoral and perverted. They're just not into you. I have to tell you that, Log Cabin. It doesn't matter that you debased yourself and endorsed Donald Trump for re-election. The 2015 platform of the Republican Party had 81 planks, 24 of which were anti-LGBT.
Wow.
So they're quite obsessed with you. They're quite obsessed with homosexuality. So yes, there are now 200 anti-LGBT bills across the country.
And this Fred Deutsch character is behind a bunch of them.
Well,
This representative, he's pushing bills through in different states. I think there's Kentucky,
is he
Tennessee,
part of an organization?
Florida,
Is it ALEC?
Georgia. Yeah, I think it must be.
Yeah, the right wing is very organized. They write
Yeah.
these bills for one city or one state, and then they spread it around the country and said, you're going to do this year. This is what we're going to do. And part of it is getting people whipped up around trans rights and trans people in locker rooms.
And bathroom bills,
And all
yeah.
that, to get people, get their side whipped up. And we're the scapegoats. That's what a scapegoat is. Awful.
0.6% of the population. Yeah.
You know what? How many gay and lesbian people are there? You know, I mean, what are we? 6% of the population, maybe. I think a lot more people
It's about,
engage in
between
homosexual
3
activity.
and 6. Yeah.
But all right, in Florida, 5 more firms have ended their support for a voucher program that funds lots of anti-LGBT schools. Among them are Wyndham Destinations, which is a hotel giant, ABC5 Fine Wines, Cigar City Brewing, and Wells Fargo. So Republicans, because of this right-wing legislature now wants to pass more funding for these anti-LGBT schools from the government. It's just discouraging. All right, where are we? Maybe we should talk about our loss this week of our lesbian sister.
Gone too soon at 72. Half of my friends are 72. This is terrible.
All right, we're getting there. But this is the first openly, there she is on the left, Deborah Batts, the first openly LGBT federal judge. She's pictured with her wife, Gwen Zornberg, a doctor, who she married in 2011. Now, Deborah was a graduate of Harvard Law School. Chime in on any of this. She's a former federal prosecutor and law professor.
She was signed on for the Avenatti case against Stormy Daniels. So.
Oh yes, that's the case that she was on when she died. But President Clinton appointed her to the Southern District of Manhattan in 1994. She worked on something called Project Rise to reduce sentences in supervised release in exchange for participating in rehab. So progressive stuff.
Yeah.
She was an African American, an attorney, a mom.
Yep.
She presided over the trials involving terrorism, the malfeasance of the EPA the Environmental Protection Agency at Ground Zero during 9/11. And as you say, the embezzlement trial of
$300,000.
So Deborah Batts, a much beloved figure in the community, gone too soon.
Yeah, another good person gone. Very sad.
All right. So we do some crime. Well, let's give them another nice story. Marsha P. Johnson.
Oh yeah, that was good news. But I mean,
let's tell them what it is.
We're naming a park in Brooklyn. I don't know which one, after Marsha P. Johnson.
There's Marsha P. Johnson, who died, I think, in 1992.
Yeah.
A street transvestites, action revolutionaries at Stonewall, a real street person, and
a real activist.
And a real activist. But this is East River State Park. Now, the governor, Andrew Cuomo, wanted something to announce when he spoke to the Human Rights Campaign, which is run by his former, is run by his former counsel, Alfonso David.
That's right.
And so this was the thing that he chose to do. Now, of course, I don't understand the significance of a Brooklyn park.
Right.
Marsha died in the Hudson River.
Yes.
Off Manhattan. Maybe was killed.
Still disputed.
Maybe took her own life. It's a big dispute. There's a movie about that.
It's a very excellent.
By David France.
It was a really good documentary.
But I have to say, and she was known as the mayor of Christopher Street, and she was also known for saying, "Don't pay it no mind." But are transgender people going to be allowed to sleep in this park? And how about building programs for transgender people, education, job programs, all these? That's what we need from the governor.
I agree.
And more than a park. I mean, fine. This doesn't cost you anything. Name a park after her. It's better than not.
Right. But employment's really important, and housing and employment, and that
education.
It's a symbolic gesture, but something real would be better.
Yeah. Yes. Got that, Governor?
Yeah.
Okay. In Iowa, Oh,
Oh,
good news from
Iowa.
Iowa. The bill to delete trans protections from the state Civil Rights Act is dead.
Oh, it is.
That's what I heard. That's what I read.
When did that happen?
Must have happened this week. That's when I wrote
That's
it
great.
down.
Fabulous.
All right, are we done with the states? Oh, all right. We got some bad crime stories.
There was the stabbings in LA and.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really sad about this because this is happening in places like Brentwood. These are liberal. These are places where there are a lot of gay people.
Yes, that's where they go to find us. I was always shocked as a kid walking through the village, and then gay bashers would come by and threaten us. And I'm thinking, what the
Right.
hell? I remember screaming. I was a kid, and I
Yeah.
screamed. They threatened me, and I said, F you.
F you.
Like, don't you know where you are? This is our place. And then they took their baseball bats out and chased me. I ran
Oh,
into the
wow.
subway. I got away, but I might not have.
But one of the conventional wisdom, one of the little epithets you would always hear is that the younger generation is better. The guy they've arrested for this, he's only 30, so
Only 30.
they're not
I
better.
mean, most of them are
necessarily.
in their 20s or even in their teens, and you know, they are also the people. I think the generation has gotten better, but I think that's also where you're still going to find the majority of the people who act out this way. Some of them are obviously a little unsure of their own sexuality, who act out this way.
Right.
Well, we have the case in New York, right, of this this man. I don't know what his sexuality is, other than he's a guy from Oklahoma. Let's put up the victim first. The victim who got his throat slit was
that's not
Kenneth
good.
Savisky, an antique
Wow.
stealer, 64, murdered by a drifter he picked up in Manhattan. So we got a picture of this kid, this drifter, 24, from Oklahoma. Now, his name is Alex Ray Scott, 24 years old. He was wanted for molesting a 5-year-old child in Oklahoma. So he takes off his ankle bracelet, misses his trial date, date, and goes to Manhattan. They say he was thinking of killing himself, if only, but he instead kills this guy, robbed him, so this certainly raises issues about watch out who you pick up.
Totally.
But I don't know if anything would have stopped this guy because he was so obviously deranged, as well. But it's a terrible story. One of the things you can do when you pick people up, we always try to say this, is introduce them to someone at a bar, stop at a deli, and say, "Oh, hi, I'm here with so and so."
So that they're known.
Somebody that they've been seen
Right.
with you, and it makes them hard to rob you
Interesting.
or kill you.
That would never occur to me, but noted.
All right, other crime stories. In Los Angeles, prosecutors have charged Joshua Ebo, E-B-O-W, 30.
No,
with
that
a-
was the guy. The guy assaulting all of the gay men in Brentwood.
Right, and 3 hate crime stabbings, but these are new charges, and he has a history,
He has a history.
of psychiatric hospitalization. Now, here's another one. This is on our side. A homeless this is not funny.
In the Upper East Side.
Did you go ahead?
No,
Yeah, that-
you tell me. Breaking
A
into
homeless
cars.
trans woman, 25 years old, named Aluden Diamond Marks, carjacked 4 cars on Manhattan's East Side, smashed into, this is not funny,
not
smashed
funny.
into 20 other cars. She had an affinity for Mercedes-Benz. On Saturday,
Wow.
she was drunk, she had a long rap sheet, but when she was 19, she was on an NBC TV feature
Really?
about trans teens living on the streets.
Wow.
And she said her mother kicked her out on the street, and she said, this life, it gets very depressing. Well, it hadn't gotten better for her, that's for sure.
No, that's terrible. Wow.
Virginia passed a bill, the state of Virginia, to ban conversion therapy. 19 states have done so, plus the District of Columbia and Puerto
And Puerto Rico.
So the good states are still doing good things.
Yeah.
And there we are with that. Okay. What else have you got in American news before we get to international news?
In American
Anything?
news.
What's going on?
What's going on in my life?
You can talk about that if you like. People are always interested
In my New
hearing.
York existence. Work, but that's about it. Hopefully everything within the bounds of the law and positive.
Well, I mean, I broke the law for a long time.
Doing what?
Well, I mean, sodomy. It was illegal until 1981.
That's right.
And I did do it before that. I was a scofflaw. Yes.
It's different
and
for women.
I'm 66 years old. I have a friend my age who was arrested for it in
Wow.
1977
Wow.
at Jones Beach. And it could have happened to me as well.
Goodness me.
You know?
No. Well, no sodomy for me to report. I'm so
Shep
sorry.
remembers when we almost got arrested out on Long Island when we were in a park, right, Shep? It's a
Wow,
famous
that's
story
another
between
story.
me and Shep. We were kids, and
Wow.
we were from Long Island, and we went back there, and we stopped off at a park to mix it up.
I have done so.
And the police came by with a searchlight.
Wow.
Because they saw a car there at a park when nobody else was around, and they were looking.
That's incredible.
Life could have been
But when
very
you're-
different.
when you're young and
could have ended
gay-
up like Bayard Rustin.
Oh no, that could have been bad for
Sure.
you. Yeah. Wow. Goodness me.
All right, international news?
What about Super Bowl? Did we want to talk about that now, or did we want to call it entertainment? It's political, kind of, isn't it?
Let's talk about it then.
Shall
I'm
we?
going to pull it out. Let's talk about the Super Bowl.
Well, I think the reason I see it as national news is because you've got this gigantic viewership watching it, and the views of what they're watching
Yeah.
is completely polarized.
Yeah.
Nobody's seeing the same thing, and nobody's agreeing on what actually happened.
Who won the game?
Who the hell won the game?
I know.
Well, we certainly don't know where they came from.
That's right. It was Kansas City, Missouri,
right.
which is next to Kansas City, Kansas. I've
That's
been to
right.
both.
And our president doesn't know that. So that was the first thing that was alarming.
Well-
But I think the second thing that I found interesting was the entertainment component
Yeah.
was highly politically charged this year.
Yes. And politically charged, and it was, what is it, J-Lo and
Shakira.
Right. And
Two Latinas.
Now, I don't know where the lesbian community was on all this, but the gay men seemed to be having a great time watching it.
I think the lesbian community mostly did. There were some memes that went around later that were
Okay.
quite, amusing or amused.
There was a lot of gay male drooling over the quarterbacks.
Yep. And
And then the lesbian coach for this 49ers, she didn't win, but she had a big commercial on the show, Katie Sowers.
she's the first ever to coach for the Super Bowl.
We should talk about her. The story came out about her this week. Did you read it? She used to play basketball for Goshen College in Indiana,
That's right.
which is, I guess, some kind of a Mennonite school. We have 8 minutes. Okay, we better move along. And she wanted to stay on as a volunteer coach, and they said parents are uncomfortable having you around their girls.
Yeah.
And so she went off, she took up football, got involved in women's football, and the school apologized to her recently.
Good.
They apologized.
Well, she's
for that.
made history
Said,
now.
That's not the way we are. Goshen, we got a non-discrimination policy now. All right.
Should we leap into international?
And there was Lil Nas X had an ad.
Yes.
Ellen and Portia
Ellen
had
and
an ad. The drag queens we showed you last week were not the first drag queens in a Super Bowl commercial. That would be RuPaul in 2000.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to that. Let's go through the international news, okay?
For sure.
India, a couple there that's seeking to marry. We told you about them. They're going to get a hearing in mid-February. That was quick.
But Mumbai Pride was in trouble because
This was terrible.
So Humsafar Trust, which organises the Pride parades in India, they're really like Stonewall here, or any other Pride group. They applied for a permit from the government to actually have the parade, but not to march in protest. But the police saw it as a potential protest, so shut it down, basically.
Shut it down and arrested 51 people. It's really rough, and so that was not a good experience at all. But they did show up for that rally.
I tell you what, if you go to a gay wedding in Mauritania, you don't want to post it on Facebook, because
No,
guess
what
what
happened to them?
happens? They are all in prison now, 10 gay men, and they might have to face the death penalty because West Africa, that part of West
Well,
Africa,
that's the death.
Sharia
They do
law.
have the death penalty by stoning for homosexuality. I don't know what they're going to do with these guys. It's an Islamic republic. They've got the Sharia law, so. They have a de facto moratorium on death by stoning, but
That's
that's
right.
on the books.
Right.
In
Ireland.
Oh yeah, it's a terrible story. Go
Do you
ahead.
think this is a backlash against marriage equality? These stabbings and beatings in railway stations. Two lovely young men in their 20s were beaten and stabbed by a gang.
Horrible. It's being investigated as a hate crime. They don't have a hate crimes law per se in Ireland, and they're pushing for that.
Yeah, they need that legislation.
But so now we told you that the Church of England has reiterated its opposition to sex outside of heterosexual marriage. So gay men are coming forward and saying, talking about the vicars that they've slept with and had sex with
Wow.
over the years. Well, true. Tanzania is going through an anti-gay crackdown. It's really been going on since 2018. Our U.S. State Department has banned the administrative chief of Dar es Salaam, Paul Macondo, who's sort of the leader of this. I mean, he's a bad guy in many ways, but he is banned. You can get 30 years in prison for that. In Germany, the Catholic bishops have just started to face facts about homosexuality.
That it's normal.
Well,
possibly.
The Berlin Archbishop said, look, it's innate, it can't be changed. They've committed themselves to one thing, newly assessing the teaching on homosexuality, sexual morality in general, and the ordination of women and marriage. So that's good on the Germans there. But time's a wasting.
They're nothing if not thorough.
I always say, until a lesbian can be pope, the church has a lot of problems.
Yep.
Right. All right. Mauritania, you've got all that.
We've done all of that.
We've got all that.
Oh, did you know that worldwide lesbians are more accepted than gay men?
Why?
In 23 Western and non-Western countries.
Why?
Well, I think it's got something to do with the fact that men in general and people that believe in gender binary find men that act unmasculine abhorrent, and this is really the root of the prejudice.
Right.
And that's what the study's backing up. It was done by NYU psychologists.
Well, I mean, I have friends who've been beaten up for being lesbian too, but
Oh, for sure.
maybe it happens to gay men more.
Yeah.
All right, okay?
No, I'm done with that.
South Africa, AIDS news. A once promising trial of an HIV vaccine has been halted because it didn't work any better than a placebo. Dr. Fauci from the NIH says he's disappointed. They gave them $130 million to test it with the Gates Foundation. And also doctors are giving anti-HIV drugs to people with coronavirus. They're not sure if it works. And our government is making progress in the suit against Gilead. All right, other entertainment news.
Oh, did you catch SNL and that fabulous
Yes.
parody?
Put that up.
Oh, yeah, we've got to see this. I've always loved Kate McKinnon. She's a fabulous, brilliant comic, in my opinion. But for many months, probably going into years now, we've all said Elsa needs a girlfriend. There was even a hashtag about that for Frozen. And they finally did a skit on SNL about the lost or deleted scenes in which she basically does say that she's...
It was great. And Billy Porter is going to be on the 51st.
Oh,
That's where
I
I
love
got
him.
51. The 51st season of Sesame Street in
love
his
him.
tuxedo gown. So congratulations. Well, we should get to our guest.
We are. We're getting to Judith now. Yes.
We are honored to have Judith Kaysen Windsor, the surviving spouse of Edie Windsor. Now, you're here to talk about her book, A Wild and Precious Life. And I don't think Edie needs much of an introduction, but why don't we just go back to a trailer for To a More Perfect Union and hear from her.
Getting married was nobody's idea but ours. Our lives were totally intertwined. We felt married in every way. Within the year, Thea died, and that marriage did not count as far as estate taxes. The federal government did not recognize our marriage.
Their life really tells a story about the history of gay people in this country. It was clear to me that this was the perfect case.
Hi, I'm Edie Windsor, and I am today an out lesbian who just sued the United States of America, which is kind of overwhelming for me.
We can all only wish for a love as deep and true and real as Edie and Thea's.
There is no such thing as gay marriage. There is only marriage.
And Edie Windsor did indeed help us move towards a more perfect union.
Yes, we
Welcome, Judith. Now, this book,
Yes.
let's hold it up. Let's put a picture of it up on the screen, A Wild and Precious Life. This memoir was finished after Edie died in 2017 with
Correct.
with the co-author. is-
Joshua Lyon.
Yeah, Joshua Lyon.
Yeah.
What are people going to learn about Edie in this book that they probably don't know?
Everything. Everything.
It's warts and all.
Yeah,
It really
warts
is.
and all.
She doesn't hold
You know,
back.
it's funny, when Josh told me about warts and all, I go, Edie never would have said that. He goes, she exactly said that. I was a little shocked because that's not just really the way she spoke. This is, I tell her, this is not about the Supreme Court case. Everybody's heard that story. Edie sued the Supreme Court. She was, fined, $363,000.
She won federal rights for same-sex legally married couples before we got Obergefell, which was making all the other states do it.
That was. What happened was it was the Defense of Marriage Act, and the Defense of Marriage Act, Section 3, defined marriage between one man and one woman.
On the federal basis.
On the federal basis. And so her taking down that helped with, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and a couple other things, and that led the way to Jim Obergefell, because at that point there were like 13 states that had marriage equality, and then once Edie's case came, states just kept rolling, and there were about 12 or 13 states that did not have, and Ohio was one of them. And then Jim Obergefell took Edie's case to the state level, and then now it's a federal law that all states.
And since we're on that subject, I want to get into Edie's life. And
Please.
You must read this book, which NPR called Brash, Funny, and Brave, which about sums up Edie, brash, funny, and brave.
Yeah. Yes.
But
yes, it does.
Are we worried about these decisions at the Supreme Court now, with the court moving to the right and the majority of the people being anti-gay at this point?
No. Edie was very clear with me. She said that we have, when Trump got elected, she's like, we have been through worse, we have come too far, and we are not going back.
Yeah.
And she's like, and we started talking about Roe versus Wade. And I said, they've been trying to take down Roe versus Wade for 48 years.
And you don't think that's going to happen with this court?
I don't know. But Edie said no. It's very difficult to overturn a Supreme Court decision.
The court wants upheld sodomy, and we had a huge
Lawrence versus
demonstration in
Texas.
1986, and then finally they reversed themselves in 2003, I guess, and they got rid of the sodomy laws, but it took 17 years for that, so they can change.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, things can change. Like you saw what was going on in South Dakota, you see what goes on in Mississippi, you see what goes on in certain states, but overall, I don't think they can take down a Supreme Court case.
Okay.
But you're right. You're right. If we lose another Supreme Court justice or two, we could be in real trouble.
Now, how soon into dating Edie did she share with you that she had a memoir that she wanted to write?
Oh, she always wanted to write her memoir, and she has some short stories, and she has some things that I'm gonna put into archive. That she always wanted to write her book. And so
she said, why didn't I start it earlier?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, because there was so much to get through. But Josh really has 80, he spent a year with us. He traveled with us, he went to events with us, he came over during the week, he spent every Sunday with us. He spent a lot of time with us.
Well,
he came to Southampton.
When they made the movie Edie and Thea,
a very long engagement.
Yes.
Engagement. I remember, because I didn't know, I'd met Edie a number of times socially and things like that, but not as much as an activist, although she was an activist, but that there was always a camera crew following them around everywhere they went.
Edie and Thea also. People don't realize that, that Edie and Thea also always had a camera crew, but even not just with a very long engagement. They were always sort of the shining light within the community.
So Edie did live to be 87.
88.
Oh, 88, I'm sorry. Okay, and she, so she came out in the 1940s, essentially, right?
Late 40s, early 50s.
1951, she was already...
she was dating women in the late 40s. It had to be,
She had crushes in high school.
She was having little affairs in Atlantic City.
Yes.
And, she was,
take us back to that.
Oh, it's my favorite part of the book is the early parts, the parts that are pre-Stonewall.
Yeah.
And, Atlantic City, Baltimore, then life in the Village. It's all fascinating and a little bit warts and all.
Oh, it was funny. Edie went to Temple University, and I did a talk there with their gender women studies. And one of the women raised her hand and asked a question. She was one of the students, and she goes, the Philadelphia Inquirer, said the book was racy. how do you think Edie Windsor would feel about the word racy? And Josh and I just started cracking up, and we were like, we don't think she would think that was enough. She was like, what do you mean racy? It was sexy. It was hot.
She was sexy.
She was
out
there.
very open about that. And some people are surprised that she remarried late in life. But she really wanted to be with. She was doing some dating after Thea died, and she finally met you.
Yes,
and
she was.
And she told us, I'm not dead yet. Yeah. And that was the way she was.
Now, did you chase her? That was what I.
Well, I did. It took me 5 years. 5 long years.
That's encouraging.
And, it wasn't blatant all the time, and I was dating other people and doing other things, whatever, but whenever I saw her, like from the first time I saw her, I don't believe in that kind of thunderbolt love thing or whatever, but I just saw Edie up there at, when she got the Lifetime Achievement Award at Sage, and there was just something about her. Just, I don't know what it was.
I was there too. I felt it, but I didn't want to.
A little different, but yes, I understand. I just felt something, and so then every time I saw her, which was a lot because I was attending all the events, and I was very much an activist myself. And I met Thea once at a Callan Lord event, right, and it had to be just before she passed away.
Wow!
I think it was like late November, December, and then she passed away randomly February 5th. 2009.
Oh my God!
So
we're
today,
on the anniversary.
Yes, so today. Yes. So.
Thank you for doing the show.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll light a yurtside candle. Actually, the Hebrew calendar, her yurtside starts at sundown tonight, so we won't get technical. But anyway.
That's great.
But anyway, they were just, it just flowed. I mean, we just one thing led to another. I would see her, and then I'd see her again, and she finally, noticed me. That I wasn't kidding. That I wasn't just like teasing her. I just wasn't like joking around. I was serious.
And the book, of course, tells us a lot about who Edie Windsor was. I mean, she wasn't just, a lesbian who happened upon this case and was an activist.
That lesbian from New York.
She was an extremely.
Griffin.
Tell us, she was extremely accomplished professionally.
That's another thing that I don't think goes as in depth in this book, and I think Josh says it. He does say it in the book. This is not the first book about Edie. This is the first book about Edie Windsor, but I hope it's not the last because there's so much more. We have so much more information. We have so much more documentation. He has so much more documentation and things that that he and Edie discussed. But he made sort of a moral and ethical decision, and we talked about it. What to put into the book and what not to put into the book. And we felt very strongly about if we didn't really have what we thought was Edie's words and Edie's language about that particular story.
But
we held back.
She was a math whiz.
She was a trailblazer.
Yeah.
She was the first woman, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but she was the first woman to own a personal computer or have access
I'll tell you
to a personal computer.
Three main things. The first one was, if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures.
Yes.
And they worked at NASA.
Loved.
Yes, which she loved. And so she said, we went to go see the movie Hidden Figures, and when they broke down the door and put in that big IBM, Edie got up from her seat and started explaining the whole thing to us. And I was like, Edie, come sit down. We'll talk about it.
Because that's what she did.
She was
This was in a movie theater?
Yeah, in a movie theater. She started explaining the whole thing. Edie was very instrumental. What they were doing at NASA, Edie was doing at the Energy Atomic Commission in New York. So she knew that IBM 730. And we have documentation that shows that Edie was working on the preliminary IBM 740.
Wow.
And we have all that documentation.
And she helped LGBT groups, organizations become computer literate.
Yeah, she went in and she organized their mailing list. So if they were going to do a direct mailing to just to women or just to men or certain sections or of things, she organized and coded their mailing list.
Let's show people a picture. I don't know if we've already done it because I haven't been looking at the monitor. But let's show them a picture of Edie and Thea in the 1960s. They got together in
Gorgeous.
'63, I
Stunning.
think it
That
was.
looks like the Hamptons. Was that the house in the Hamptons?
Yes.
And
That is the Hamptons.
That's where I would have met them in the 1980s. At my friend Herb Cohen and Danny Cook held the annual party out there for the East End Gay Organization, and they were always there.
Edie was one of the founding members of East End Gay Organization.
Exactly.
Edie and Thea, I should
which
say.
was a big activist group, played a big role in the early AIDS funding that came through for people and things like that.
Yeah.
And we should also show the famous picture of Edie at the Supreme Court. Can we put the famous picture?
Yes.
Why did she have her arms open like this? What's the story?
She was saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. She was going across the whole line. And the policeman, the policeman looks like, he's escorting.
Ushering.
He was actually, they were kicking her off the steps because you're not allowed to be on the
I know.
Supreme Court
I've
steps.
been kicked off, too.
Yes, he was actually saying, you need to get off the Supreme Court
get
steps.
arrested for
But
that.
she's like, thank you, blowing kisses and saying, thank you, but like running away from the police officer to try to get off the court steps.
In order to get married to Thea,
Yes.
she had to go to Canada.
Correct.
And
Correct.
she was aided by Brendan Fay
Yes.
from something called the Civil Marriage Trail.
Yes.
Which escorted people up, and they got them a Canadian judge, and they got people. And this is when Thea was quite disabled.
Suffering from MS,
She was quadriplegic at that point, and I think she could move one or two of her left fingers.
Right.
That's
Wow.
it.
And Brendan
That's
got
it.
them up to Canada, got them back, and they were married. And she was eternally grateful all through her rest of her life to the grassroots movement. And
Yes.
so Brendan was one of the people who was part of our groups that worked to get us into the St. Patrick's Day parade and knock down that door of bigotry. And
That was a
you
big
were
deal.
there
Oh, sure.
with Edie
Yes.
and a whole bunch of grassroots activists, Danny Drum, Tom Moulton,
Tom Duane.
you and Edie are there in the middle. They're all back there.
Yep.
And she marched the entire route of the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Absolutely.
That day.
Incredible
Absolutely.
energy.
She used to walk 10,000 steps a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She was
Well,
something.
Now, and she's the book says that she became aware of Stonewall right after she came back from a trip at one point.
Yeah, they traveled to Europe quite a bit because Thea was from Amsterdam. So she was European, so they would constantly be going to Europe. And they came home, and, in those days, as everybody else did, Edie was a 2-3 pack a day smoker. I mean, she was a major smoker. She said, she also said to me, including the Supreme Court, including everything that she ever did, the hardest thing that she ever did was quit smoking.
And I love that that's detailed in the book.
Yeah, and then she took it very, very seriously, and to keep herself honest, she taught other lesbians, smoke enders, and
substance abuse is really high in the lesbian community, but she describes very well going to the lesbian bar, the Laurels, and being nervous and sitting there by herself with, as she says, a book, a cup of coffee, and a cigarette.
Yeah.
And then waiting to talk to people. And when she first meets Thea, she says she's so nervous she lights a cigarette to calm her nerves, because you were really doing it on your own then. And that's why so many lesbians
There
had
was a
smoking.
lot of smoking in
A
gay
lot of
bars in
smoking.
It
those
was
days.
anxiety
And
driven.
drinking.
For sure, and drinking.
Neither Edie nor Thea were big drinkers. They'd have a drink, but they weren't
Yeah.
big drinkers. They were, definitely smokers. And they were together about 10 years, and that actually was a big thing. And Edie was like, I can't do it. I can't quit. It's like they almost broke up over it.
Wow.
And Thea was like, don't be silly. That's crazy. But then eventually Edie did quit smoking.
There's an anecdote in the book where you come home one day and Edie's put down the photos of Thea or turned them over or taken them down out of respect for you and the new relationship. Did you personally ever feel that you were living in the shadow of this great person?
No, if we want to be honest, Edie dated a few women prior to me, and some of those women had issues with those pictures of Thea and talking, and Thea being such a big presence in her life, and I did not. And so that was sort of how you carry that baggage from one relationship to another.
You're making me think, because I went to the opening of the second season of After Forever on Amazon. Have you seen it?
No.
It's about a gay man loses his partner, and this is done in short segments and things like that, and he finally, after a year or so, finds new love, and that is a scene in there with the pictures of the other person there and all this this kind of stuff. It's on Amazon, folks. You
Yeah.
can check it out. And
Yeah.
but of course, the late partner pops up as a figure in the series as well.
Well,
But
welcome to my life. I mean, I say it all the time. I'm like, who am I going to date after Edie Windsor?
Well, I mean, I have a
You know?
hard question for
Yeah.
you. Was she the love of your life?
Yes, by far. I had never been through anything like that before in my life.
And, well,
And it was so
I guess,
special. It was so important.
So
It
you've
was-
talked about this
yeah.
powerful feeling. What was it about Edie?
It was everything. She just had this, way with words and the way she carried herself, and I was just very attracted to
Classy.
her. And she was a class act. She had gravitas. She was so brilliant. I mean, just everything. I was just fascinated with her. Just fascinated.
I met her twice.
and I thought she was gorgeous.
She is.
I
She
thought
was absolutely gorgeous. Rocked to satin
Yeah.
flowers like nobody's
Yeah.
business. I met
Yeah.
her twice. I was lucky to. The
Stunning.
first time she did tell me those immortal words, "Don't postpone joy."
Uh-huh.
And then the second time I knelt down,
Yeah.
she was sitting at a table, probably like the GLAAD Awards or something
Sure,
like that.
sure.
And she looked right into my eyes like I was the only person in that room. And I've never forgotten it. She just put her attention on you and saw everything.
Yeah.
She's an amazing woman.
And towards her later
Yeah, she
years, I
was-
mean, she got really involved. She wanted to promote youth issues.
Yes.
That was a big thing for her.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
she
it's-
would corner me because I used to work at Hedrick Martin. And what are you going to do about this? And why aren't
Yeah.
we doing this? And
Yeah. Yeah. It
And
was-
Lesbians Who Tech. She's there's a coding scholarship in her name,
Yeah.
which is fantastic.
The first year they did the Edie Windsor Coding Scholarship, I think they had 4 or 5 that they supported. The next year it was 40. The next year was 50, and now they're up to like 100.
Wow.
So we have 100, lesbian, non-binary, queer women going to coding school and getting jobs.
because of the.
It's the Edie Windsor Coding Scholarship from
How can
Lesbians Who
people
Tech.
apply for an Edie Windsor scholarship?
Go to the Lesbians Who Tech
Lesbians Who Tech,
website or
yep.
follow them on Twitter and apply. It's a big ordeal to apply, and then it's a very intensive 6-8 weeks of your life to learn how to code. Do it yourself. And it's interesting that I've met so many of them at this point, and it runs the gamut. It could be a student, a young person, 20, 22, and it could be somebody who has their own business and they want to learn how to code as opposed to pay to somebody, to learn like the POS terminal or whatever.
Right.
They want to learn how to code. So it runs the gamut of ages.
So how much of your life is devoted to as keeper of the flame? Of keeping this alive, because the other day somebody said something, and apropos of activism, you made a whole pitch for Thea Spire, and said,
Yeah.
"Hey, she was expelled from Sarah Lawrence when she was caught kissing another woman in the parking lot." And then you
Yeah,
talk
it
about
was.
all of her achievements, and obviously about Edie's achievements. How much of your life is devoted to that?
I do have a full-time job, but other than that, all of it.
Wow.
All of it.
And what is the legacy that you want people to know and remember?
I do. I want them to read this book. I want them to know. I think it's very important that people know our history, and they need to know their names, and they need to know what they did on a like you said, a grassroots level. Not that Edie Windsor took down the Defense
Right.
of Marriage Act. I want them to know the 40, 50, 60 years of activism that she did, that it was the lesbians during the AIDS crisis that came in and helped the men and got their medication or brought them food when their families turned their backs on them and wouldn't even visit them. It was the women, and that's when she said that's when the men and the women came together. Other than that, it was a very separate community. Edie was an anomaly. She felt that everyone has their own.
No. But what do you think
thing.
it was about her that embraced her lesbian identity and her life so early? Because a lot of people just put a bottle on it. Now, she briefly
know.
was married to a man, Mr. Windsor,
Yes.
for briefly.
Yes.
But,
It was less than a year.
and she was
yeah.
out before that.
Yeah.
Right? To him, right?
No, not to
No?
him. He didn't.
I thought that was. But anyway.
Yeah.
My misreading.
I wasn't there.
Right.
But,
So what was it about her? Because
interesting
some
that-
people just forewent
interesting
love.
that you say that. Saul his name is Saul Weiner, but Saul Windsor, when they got divorced, he was such a gentleman about
He
it.
was.
And he never said a word to anybody. And then he got remarried about 5 or 6 years later. And I know his wife, Muriel, and his daughter, and they knew all about Edie and all about what happened and whatever. And on Edie's 70th birthday, Saul called her. It was the first time she'd spoken to him in 50 years.
Wow.
And then when Edie was going through the Supreme Court case, Muriel Weiner called Edie, and they sat and talked, and they became friends.
It's amazing.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
it's this. I mean, that's what I mean. She just had this energy about her. And then when I went down to Philadelphia last October to do the street sign naming in Philadelphia, Muriel Weiner was there, Liz Weiner was there, her granddaughter was there. They were all there.
How about a street in New York?
We're working on it.
I hope so.
They have all these rules and regulations, and it used to be you had to be deceased for 5 years to get a street sign, and now they just changed it to 3 years. So it's actually happening in 2020.
Fantastic.
It is going to happen in 2020, and I want to do Thea's street sign naming also.
She's such a great storyteller. Of all the stories that she told you and that appear in this book, do you have a favorite?
No. Because there's too many.
Too many.
There's too many to choose from, and there's so much in here that's not, or there's so much I have
That's
is
not in
not in the book.
Wow.
Because we really felt strongly about, she had edited, and she was a fierce editor. She had edited probably 80-90% of the book, and then it's very obvious where it kind of switches over, where it's no longer Edie.
It's in italics.
Yeah, exactly. And so to sort of pull it all together.
This is a serious question.
Yes.
I read the book. I thought, who's going to make this movie? You're not talking about
I'm not
that.
talking about it. I don't
All
like
right.
to jinx things, but
I mean, on the other, she's already been the subject of a number of films, documentaries and things.
Yeah, documentaries, but
Especially after seeing
a movie or a
A
series.
Matter of Sex about Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah.
It made me kind of think it was the same kind of a story.
I'd love to see this. Would be great.
We'd like to see a movie. We'll just leave it at that.
It will happen. It will happen.
The other thing that comes through is Edie's honesty. She's just fearlessly honest in talking about herself in terms of being self-critical.
Yes.
And she used I
Absolutely.
remember when she won the case. She's at the press conference down at the community center, and she's saying, I don't like using this word, but the closet is a bitch is what she said. I don't like that word.
Homophobia.
Homophobia is a bit.
Homophobia.
Homophobia
Yeah.
is a bitch.
Right, and was acknowledged, even though she led a relatively open life for a person of her generation, she acknowledged the perils of the closet.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big deal, and it was a big struggle with Thea for many, many years because she'd been kicked out of Sarah Lawrence. She worked at a hospital. It was they were I think they did what and I've discussed this with a couple of people. Edie led two different lives. She had a private life and she had a professional life. And I did the same thing in the 90s. When I started working in the financial and Wall Street, I had a private life and a professional life. I wasn't out at work either.
Yeah. I was the president of my gay student union. I thought I could go back in the closet and teach high school at a Catholic school where I used to go. I was out of my mind, but thank God they didn't hire me because I just was able to be out for the rest of my life. I'm not saying it was always easy, but there it is.
We are gays of a certain age, and I'm hoping that the young ones will really find out about Edie. What are your words of wisdom to them? Why must
Down to
you
our last 20 seconds.
follow Edie Windsor? All of you millennials and Gen Zs, why?
It is, again, it is so important to know their names. Not just a lesbian from New York who took down the Defense of Marriage Act. They need to know her name. They need to know Larry Kramer's name. They need to know David Mixner's name.
And the name of the book is A Wild and Precious Life, a memoir by Edie Windsor. We'll be back next week with Ann, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.